Hello and welcome. This is We Make Art, and I'm your host, artist and mentor Sarah Rockwood. I am so glad you have joined me today, that you have chosen to listen to this episode, which will be salty. It will be fiery. I'm sure there will be a curse word or two, which if you've listened to this podcast before, you are used to from me. But yeah, I got some salty thoughts on this topic. I got some salty things to say, because today we are talking about where ideas come from and why we have been lied to about that. So this whole topic, it's again, as often with these episodes, there are things that have percolated in my brain for quite some time before I bring them here. And then you're like, well, Sarah, then why does it sound like you're rambling? And I would say, no, don't be salty. But yes, there are moments where it's like, I'm finding out even more here on the microphone. But yes, this one has percolated in my brain for quite some time. And it stems from a video clip I saw. Wow, I felt really old as I said video clip, but I can't think of a different turn of phrase. A video clip, say it a third time, Sarah, that'll make it really work. A video of an interview with, let's call him disgraced, alleged rapist, Neil Gaiman. And if you're like, wait, Sarah, I don't know who Neil Gaiman is, like, then don't worry about it. You don't need to for this context. And two, like, wait, what do you mean alleged rapist? This isn't something that's new to me. Well, in which case, Google, there's been a lot about him. And I guess I get really salty about this because, in particular with Neil, and because I was so enamored with him in the 2000s and the 2010s, and I have many of his books. I've read many of his books. And what I saw in this video that I'm about to tell you about is one thing that bothered me. But then what has come out about the man since is just like, okay, well, the term "get fucked" springs to mind. So this video I saw with Neil Gaiman, it was like a Q&A with the audience and at a book reading or something. And someone in the audience asked, like, where do you get your ideas from? Which is a common question. It's something that people ask a lot. Oh, where do you get your ideas? If they're a consumer of art rather than a creator of art, it's said with like a, wow, like, gee whiz, where do you get all these ideas? And if they are an artist themselves and wanting to figure out how to generate more ideas from themselves, it's like, well, where do you get your ideas from? There are different energies. And this person asked with the energy of like, well, where do you get your ideas from? And Mr. Gaiman responded, I don't remember word for word, but the gist of the matter was, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. It was that vibe. Of like, oh, I'm asked this question all the time, and it's so difficult to answer where ideas come from. And as I say, I saw this some time ago, and even in that moment, before I'd done all this work, before I was like deep in this, before I was doing the work of then sharing this exploration of self and creative sovereignty with you guys, with the world, I still was kind of like, what? What do you mean you don't know where ideas come from? And yes, there is an element of the esoteric, and there is an element of the spiritual and the woo-woo in terms of where ideas come from. Much like scientists are not able to pinpoint the origin of thought. The idea of like the origin of ideas is, yes, ephemeral, is, yes, something that, you can't quite being like land on, like into. But this idea that idea generation and where ideas come from, it being a mystery, just pisses me off. It's really something, to my mind, in my opinion, which you're listening to this, so you're here for it. It's misogyny. It's patriarchy dressed up as poetry. I have sat on author panels. When I first started writing novels, when I put out my first novel, I was very lucky that I did a bunch of different conventions with my Torn from Stone series, with my Phoenix series. Torn from Stone is the first novel. When I did conventions, I got added to author panels, and I was like, wow, okay, well, this is interesting. I think all but one panel I was on, and I did a bunch of conventions in one summer, so I was on a bunch of different panels. I was the only woman on the panel. And just the big dick energy, like that big swinging dick energy, was just like palpable. I can't remember what it was, but one of the authors, who was a big author, realistically, if we're talking about books sold, I should not have been sitting next to him on a panel at that point. I was a debut author, and this guy had sold many, many books, had written many, many books. And I'm sure part of him was like, who the fuck is this girl sitting next to me? And on some level, okay, that's fair. That's fair. But he said something and I didn't understand it. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? And this guy looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads, and was like, it means blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. Because I figured, you know what? I'm on the panel and I don't know what that means. You can't tell me half this room doesn't know either. Excuse me. You can tell I'm fired up today. So this idea of gatekeeping the generation of ideas drives me nuts, because it really does say, and we know that this is a patriarchal and white supremacist and capitalistic purview. Yes. Modus operandi of genius is something you're born with, and if you don't have it, don't bother. Right? That all these things are bestowed from on high, and if you didn't get it when you came out of the box, well, shit out of luck. Support those who did. This is another argument I used to have with another man. We get into this of like, well, everybody's born with the same, with a blank slate. Everybody's born with the same situation, the same opportunities. And I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Are you dense? Like, what? What do you mean everybody on this planet is born with the same? Anyway, the litany of militant feminist anger that has reared its ugly head. No, its righteous head in me is over the years. But yes, it's to say that, like, if you have to ask, you can't afford it attitude to ideas and to art making in general, right? We have this mythos of the auteur, predominantly male auteur filmmaker, who is just such a nightmare to deal with, but then they give us XYZ and it wins all these awards, so it was all worth it. The delicate male genius within the artist world is just infuriating. It's infuriating, because this idea of, like, if you're not born with it, you're never going to have it, does not take into consideration the lived experience of so many people. I know a lot of you listening to this right now will have lived this life. Like, if you have never had the space to imagine, the space to explore your art because you were raising your siblings, right? Happened to a lot of us. Or you have survived intense trauma, or even not into capital T trauma and lowercase t trauma. If you were building a business while holding your family together, or you were home with your kids while your husband was going to work, or your other partner, not to gender, you're home with your children while your spouse is going out and working. How could you possibly, and let me say this categorically, like, stay-at-home parents, that is an incredibly difficult job. I did have a conversation once with a woman who was like, oh yeah, I figure on my mat leave I'd write my novel. And I was like, that might be that might be too intense an expectation to put on yourself with your first child. She's like, really? I'm like, has no one else said this to you? Like, you're going to be on mat leave with your very first child. I don't think writing a novel, I mean, that's a lot to ask of yourself. Outline the novel? Great. But maybe give yourself space in that life. So we have a great number of us have lived lives where there have been obstacles to devoting our time, energy, and attention to creation. And I think for someone who, and if I use Neil Gaiman as an example here, I mean, he was raised in Scientology. He was a young sort of crown prince of Scientology. His whole life has been about him, about raising him up, about how special he is. Most of us don't live that life. And I would argue that living that kind of life isn't really that great for your mental health or your artwork anyway. But I digress. So this mindset of if you're not born with it, you don't have it. It doesn't just discourage women. It doesn't just discourage those of us who have lived lives where we haven't had that space. It erases our experience. And it contributes in some ways to ageism. In that, like, you know, there are stories. Oh, is it Grandma Moses? Yes, who didn't start painting till she was like in her 80s and then was an incredibly prolific and renowned painter. I mean, we're talking about her now. I'm mentioning her now. It does imply, like, if it didn't happen early, then it's never going to happen. And I do sit and ponder with heaviness in my heart sometimes, like, that there are places in this world that are going through unbelievably difficult things, where the people there don't have food, let alone the time, energy, space to think about writing a poem. So, yeah, this kind of duality of like, well, if you have to ask, you can't afford it, and if you weren't born with it, it ain't gonna happen. It irks me. It tasks me. It drives me batty. Because ideas are not bestowed by some magical muse. Yes, I talk about getting centered. Yes, I talk about opening the channel. And that opening of the channel is a return to the self. Because, again, not bestowed by a magical muse, built layer by layer through lived experience, curiosity, and creativity. They're a birthright, not a prize, not something that, like, oh, well, I got it first, so none of you can have it. That thing, it just, And I want to stress that even, because I've been through this in my life where I had periods of immense creativity, and then in the darker parts of my life, in the, and I'm going to say in my mid-30s, that's when my life really started to take a, I mean, it hadn't been great, but shit got really bad in my mid-30s into my early 40s. Oh God, I'm mid-40s now. Wow. Yeah, in my mid-30s, when things started to get really bad, it was very difficult to feel inspired. And I thought that was a failure on my part. There was a time where I was like, no, I'll never record another record. And I did. I went on to later to record albums, more albums, and I will record more again in the future. But I can look back now and see that it wasn't that I was uninspired. I was in burnout. So if you find yourself in a place where you were once prolific, where you were once creating all the time, and now it's a struggle to find, quote unquote, inspiration, it's a struggle to find the ideas, I would ask you, are you underfed spiritually and physically? Are you feeling undervalued right now? Or are you being undervalued right now? Are you overworked? I think that's the first step in this idea generation and in cultivating that and building those layers is really honoring our vessel and our spirit and giving ourselves space to be still and quiet. And once you have a handle on that, then we can get into building the muscle. Ideas come through movement of the mind, movement of the body, right? Through repetition, through exploration. And I think we cultivate them through first doing something I call artistic cross-training. Much like regular cross-training, we're going to do a bunch of different things. But the first step of that is exposing ourselves to what's not ours. What do I mean by that? Well, let me define ours for a second here. So ours being the medium through which we feel the most comfortable creating, the primary medium we use to convey our artistic ideas, exploring what is not that. So writers, take a dance class. Musicians, go to a museum. Explore outside of your area of expertise. Allow your body and your brain and your heart and your spirit time to make new connections in these new worlds. I don't envision a world where I am a professional dancer by any stretch of the imagination, but I do thoroughly enjoy dancing and get a lot out of it. And I do feel it makes me a better musician. It makes me a better singer for sure, and it makes me a better musician as well because of how rhythm moves through my body. The comfort level I have with feeling a rhythm through my pelvis. I would also say for me, it's the landscape photography that I do. Again, I have no aspirations of being known for my landscape photography. I do think it's quite good, but I don't, I'm not going to be like, putting it on a marquee or whatever. I was trying to think of a Simpsons joke and I can't find one that quickly. But being in nature, observing the curve of the land or the flatness of the land, the space, feeling the birds, getting still, being still, because most of the time I forget my tripod, so I'm holding that phone and I've got to find real, true stillness to take the shot on uneven terrain with and you know how I feel about bugs and bugs crawling on, it's not fun. But it is exciting to feel the elements. It informs my writing completely. I share on Instagram regularly in my stories and in my feed, poems that I've written as a result of the photo I have taken in nature. So exploring outside of your comfort zone is a first step in this cultivating and growing our idea muscle. So when you're participating in these things outside of your comfort zone, when you're, if you're a solo artist, if you spend most of your time solo, which is something as a writer I do, getting into a class situation can also really expand one's idea muscles there. But when we are in these situations, when we're exploring, it is an active exploration. We don't just consume. Our goal is to commune. So if you're going to the ceramics class or the, those classes where you can like paint, they like do a paint workshop and stuff. And like, yes, it's fun. Take a friend, go have a good time, but also be present with what you are doing. That's the difference. When you're in the museum and you're walking around, or the art gallery, it is one thing to gently stroll and passively look at the art. It is another to do that with the artist's goggles on, with your artist mindset, which I would argue is a part of yourself, your true self. So to do it present with yourself. And the pieces that you are called to, again, we talk about this all the time. The stuff that stirs us is either like, oh, I feel at home, or oh, this can go fuck off. If you're having a polarizing reaction. I have literally walked around, I wish I could remember the name of the piece, and seen a piece of art that pissed me off. Now I'm remembering the piece, but I don't know the name of it. I was in a local art gallery and I saw this piece of art and it made me so fucking mad. It just drove me nuts. And I thought, okay, you're having a really visceral reaction to this piece. You're going to stand here and you're going to figure it out. Why are you so angry with this piece of static art on the wall? Like, well, clearly, not static, but like it's at its elemental level. This is paint on a canvas and you're mad. So why, Sarah? Why? And sitting there and working through that. And so when you're looking at these things, where you're participating in these activities, ask yourself, like, what was the artist trying to say in the situation with a specific work of art you're consuming? Or what is the art form trying to say? Because ballet says something very different to tap dancing. What are they trying to say? What does, is it Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message? And then turn your head and look left and right and see, how are other people reacting to this work of art, to this class? Like, what is this bringing out in the humanity around me? And then turn inward. What is this stirring in me? I remember with this piece of art that I was looking at, I remember my sister was there and I was like, what the fuck is this shit? Because it made me mad. And she's like, I don't know, it's nice. And I'm like, what? Explain to me why it's nice. And she was like, I don't know, it's just nice. And I'm like, okay, Sarah, you need to breathe. But it's just every once in a while, I'm generally very calm. But there are some times where I'm just like, this bothers me, and I just express it. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with expressing it. I'm not inflicting it on anyone. That's the key, I think, is that there's a big difference between going, this artist is garbage. Why is this art here? And this piece is making me angry. Why? Those are very different things. And I think most of the time, the trolling we see on the internet, you've done a show, if you've presented anything to the world, you've had positive comments and then you've had friggin' negative comments. And oftentimes, in both cases, whether you have a positive reaction to something or a negative reaction to something, it is about you. Not the work is sparking it in you, but it isn't about the artists themselves, right? Yes, so in that moment, I'm not personally attacking the artist for the piece of art that's making me angry. If anything, bravo. Bravo, you got a reaction out of me. I'm asking myself, why does this piece of art irk me so? So when you are in these artistic cross-training situations, when you're in the class that's something outside your comfort zone, when you're walking through the museum, when you're communing when we are communing with this other art form that is not our primary means of expression, ask yourself, what is the artist trying to say? / what is the art form trying to tell me, trying to say? What is this drawing out of the humanity around me? How are they reacting? What does that mean? What do I think that means? And what does this stir in me? What is sparking? What is pulling up in me? And then after you've done all of that, or, I'm saying after you've done all of that, it's a process, right? We're layering. You go to the class, you come home, you take your notes, that kind of thing. After you've done all of that, we pause. Let silence become your collaborator. Take a moment. Journal through everything you've learned. Make notes on it. That's the difference. That's what turns this. That's what allows this process to become, this artistic cross-training, to become something more intentional, more of a cultivation. When we treat the assessment, our assessment of it, our gathering of information, as sacredly as we treated the process of gathering that information. Make notes on it. I love a fancy notebook. Get yourself a nice fancy notebook you can carry around with you to all these things. Make your notes. You can refer back, so you can cultivate, so you can pull through the themes that emerge. Take a moment, take some time to ask yourself how what you've learned could be applied to your own art, directly and indirectly. For myself, moving in a dance class, the way my breath moves as I move my torso, and this is a podcast, so why am I moving my torso? But the movement of my body, what that does to my breath, is then something, that rhythm, that I can then directly apply to a vocal melody, to a percussive part in my music. Right? When I moved my body, it cultivated this feeling inside of me. This breath can cultivate that sound or that emotion in my audience. How does this come through the piece? It comes through like this, right? We can take like the painting I saw that pissed me off. Why did it piss me off? Okay, the subject. Was it the subject? Why is the subject irking me? Is it something I need to explore for myself? Yes, okay, maybe it is. All right, let's journal through why I was activated by that. And from that journaling through, is there a thread of a poem here? Are there lyrics here? Yes, there are, and we mine them. So you're in the work, you're exploring and examining the work, and then you're exploring and examining how that stuff you've explored and examined could be applied to your own work. And then once you've done all that, once you've moved through that process, get still and quiet again and ask yourself, what is ready to move through me? And this is a situation where you don't need a lightning bolt. You don't need to smack upside the head of an idea. You don't need a light bulb to go off. You just need a thread, a spark, a feeling. And then you follow it. And you trust it. And you let it morph and grow through your chosen medium. You let it expand and move through you. And then you do it again and again and again. And as you go through this process, as you go outside your comfort zone, as you cultivate your artistic eye, the ideas will come more Quickly? Yeah, quickly. More easily. More frequently. And you get to a place where your lifestyle, how you live in your day-to-day life, is cultivating your artistic soil. And your artwork is in turn feeding back into that. This is how you strengthen your idea muscles. This is how you cultivate creative freedom. There's a real creative freedom knowing that, like, you can make art whenever you want to make art. It involves a level of self-care and self-respect that we are not really encouraged to embrace and embody. It is a mark of self-respect to feed yourself, to nourish yourself, to care for your vessel and your spirit. Yes, it's self-care, but it says something to the world around you that you value yourself, that you take care of yourself. And your art is part of that. Your art making is part of that. Now, I'm not saying it's something we get perfect. I'm still working on it myself, and I'm in this work 24/7. And it's still a process. And some days are better than others, and some weeks are better than others, better being a relative term really at this point. But yeah, it's a process. It's perpetual motion machine. It's that kind of thing of like, once you get into the flow of it and you cultivate a process, when you develop a process that cultivates your idea generation and you get more comfortable with it and you start to trust it, that trust begets more ideas, and you get to a place where you do not fear the blank page. You do not fear the empty space. You know that the empty space and the blank space can be, frightening, but that fear is something that can be explored. Maybe frightening isn't the right word. That there can be intrepidation, anticipation before you embark on something new, but you have the self-trust to know that is part of the process, and you will find the end. You will find the work. So right now, if you're feeling like you have no ideas and you don't know where ideas come from, and if you haven't found them by now, you're never going to find them. I hope by listening to this that you realize that that isn't true. You are not idealists. That's a hard word to say. Ideal? No, that's why, because I'm trying to add an L. You are not idealess. You are just under-encouraged. And that ends now. That ends right motherfucking now. So if you are looking for more support through this journey and through reconnecting with yourself to cultivate the stillness that I mentioned in this process, I have a beautiful resource for you. And I've mentioned it every episode, so, if you've heard this before, this is your sign to go and get a hold of it. The Art of Return is waiting for you. It's free, it's private, it can live in your pocket, and it was created to nourish. It really came from a period in my life of real clarity around the work that I do. And that the journey home is the most important one, back to ourselves. Because that's where all the gooey, lovely, juicy goodness is. So I will end by saying that creativity and artistry can be cultivated. As I'm sure I've demonstrated to you in this podcast, it can be cultivated. we can all grow and change. As artists and as people, if you met me 10 years ago, you'd be like, oh, okay. You're very different now. And I am. I'm very different than I was 6 months ago. I'm very different than I was 2 years ago. So we can all grow and change. And the first step is creating the space for our souls to breathe. So I hope you take advantage of the art of return. I'm excited to see what this sparks in you listeners. So please drop me a line. I'm over on Instagram, and you can always DM me there or email me through my website, whatever works best for you. And let me know how this cultivating of ideas, how stepping outside of your medium, communing with other forms of art, enriches your artistic experience. So, as always, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.